we've gained over the years. I don't think you'll hear a lot that's new, but hopefully what I can bring through a bit is how the thinking of operators is evolving as it deals with the mobile data revolution that's going on. And really, you know, while I don't typically like to mention competing products, clearly the seminal event in the industry with mobile data was the introduction of the iPhone, because that's what really got people's attention around what the power of a mobile data network could provide and what kind of capabilities could be embodied in the phone. And so that goes back, you know, 5-7 years now. So let me talk a little bit about, and I presume we're all good with the streaming and all that, because it says do not close desktop presenter. I have not touched anything except the page down button. But let me talk a little bit about what's going on. Again, none of this, for many of you, this may not be. I want to socially network with people that are at the Yard House, or I guess there's this application Foursquare where you can become the mayor of a location if you happen to frequent it. So presumably there's a mayor of the Hard Rock Cafe at this point. But those are the types, one of the several elements of expectations that our customers now have. You also find a proliferation of wireless in almost every conceivable device, from cameras to PlayStations to even SD cards have built-in Wi-Fi to them. And so the question is, how do you bring all that together in a seamless experience, and then how does it in turn access the global network for uploading to Facebook or to your website or whatever? We are finding, or as I talk to CIOs that are customers of ours, they're a bit struggling with how they take advantage of this mobility capability. You know, several years ago, they could kind of dictate the type of device an employee was going to have. They could then somewhat with confidence load certain applications, but they at least knew what the employee was having. Most CIOs at this point have punted on that idea because they know that their employees want to have choice. If they want an iPhone, they're going to buy an iPhone. If they want an Evo from Sprint, they're going to get an Evo. And they in turn as a CIO need to try to figure out, how do I accommodate these users onto my network and then take advantage of the fact that they've got a very powerful device in their hand, and how do I make that something that I can improve productivity of a mobile workforce, a sales force, a service or technician team, or whatever it might be. So how that gets integrated into their business processes is a new and emerging debate that's occurring in the CIO suites. And finally, up in the upper left, this all sums up into what is effectively a true mobile internet experience. We are right at the verge of the shift. So prior to true 4G networks, and I'm putting true in front of 4G for a very specific reason, true 4G networks really become a mobile IP network. They introduce the degree of low latency that makes it feasible for applications, and it's an expectation that customers have, and it gives you the flatness and the availability of getting out to the internet without going through the very popularly, you know, and generally disdained walled gardens of mobile providers. So the original 3G services, you know, Sprint, like all of its competitors, would take the mobile data through kind of a chokehold because that's what we had to do in the technology. Now with 4G services like WiMAX, it's truly a flat IP network, and you've got IP all the way to the phone, and you're getting out to the IP network much more rapidly and with less latency. So that does open up the experience for customers. When you sum all these requirements up, you have to have a mobile IP experience to really deliver it. When you add all this up, it's the tremendous data growth the industry is seeing. You know, the graph on the left, there's every one of us in the industry would have an internal graph that looks just like that. These are the industry graphs, and this is one of those cases where the industry prognostication seems pretty well on track. On the right-hand side of the chart, you'll see kind of the relative amount of tonnage that are driven by these different types of devices. You notice down on the bottom you have laptops driving most of the data. That's traditionally been the case. However, the growth of air cards with laptops is growing at a fairly steady rate. It's not the explosive growth we see in the very first category, smartphones. And that's where most of the challenge is for us as a wireless operator is today, is with the proliferation of smartphones. So while they don't drive as much tonnage on a per user basis, there's a lot of users out there with these things in their hand. I'm sure, does anyone in the audience not have a smartphone as one of their devices? Wow, said with pride. That's interesting, especially in this kind of audience. You're a marvel. Of course, now you know there can be some cheating going on because you can be using devices, as I said, through your smartphone as a hotspot. But at the end of the day, the challenge that I see is with the smartphone and its usage, because you've got two things going on. You've got very powerful computers in these very small packages that have now dual-core processors in it. They're going to go to quad-core processors in the future. You got screens that are vibrant. They're big. They can go up, you know, reasonably to about a 4.3-inch diagonal screen. If you get into the tablet world, you've got the 10-ish inch screen on a large tablet, and then the 7-inch screen is the other kind of the standard. Those are the things that are really driving a lot of the usage on the network. And the gaming consoles and the mobile phone projectors are interesting, but not very prevalent. But it's really that top category that really provides the significant challenge on two fronts. One is there's a lot of people using, call it a modest to a above average amount of traffic on the data, on the network, and they're mobile on top of it. So a mobile network is much different than what I'd call a nomadic or a fixed wireless network, where you can really, you know, be planted as we are here. Probably, if those of you are either on the local Wi-Fi network or you're on some carrier's 3G or 4G network, and as long as you're here, you're good to go. You start moving around, you really put an additional strain and requirements on the network once you get mobile. At the end of the day, that traffic pattern or that traffic growth is really putting a lot of demands on spectrum. That is now becoming the number one thing that's the topic of the industry is spectrum. Where's it coming from? There's a couple of companies that assert that their merger is going to somehow magically create more spectrum to enable. That's a bit of a hollow argument from my point of view, but nonetheless, spectrum is very important, and how efficiently we use that spectrum is extremely, extremely important. There are two components, too, to the data usage. I've talked about tonnage, but the other thing that drives us crazy are the number of connections, in other words, the number of session requests we get on the network from a mobile device. And it is staggering, the rate of growth of just the pings to the network from devices like a handheld smartphone have grown exponentially, just on the same pattern as that curve, although shorten that up to just an 18-month to 2-month or 2-year window, where we've seen connections expand dramatically, exponentially on our network because of the proliferation of a large number of smartphone devices. When you combine that with the tonnage requirements, you get the entire impact of this data wave that's coming at us and that we're in the midst of trying to address. Now, connections in and of themselves, they tend to impact the core elements of the network. And when we have elements in the core, that's somewhat manageable. You have to throw, you know, hardware at it to fix it. But really, the combination of that really is challenging for wireless operators, the impact of the connections plus the tonnage on the RF layer. And that's where the spectrum issue comes into play. So the way we're addressing, I'm going to spend just a couple of slides talking a little bit of how Sprint specifically is addressing it with a modernization program that we call Network Vision. And basically, this impact is so great to us that we're choosing to completely overhaul our wireless network to the latest technology that will help us drop our costs on a per megabyte basis and also increase the technology and spectrum flexibility that we can get from the core elements of our CDMA network. We're going to a platform that consolidates a lot of legacy technology into things that are much more common, such as, you know, instead of having proprietary cables going back and forth in the equipment, we just have Ethernet connections. So you can see it's very heavily software defined. It's very heavily based on standard chipsets, less customization, less proprietary type technology and hardware, which allows us to more smoothly and easily upgrade the software for future requirements. So based on the deployment of this, which is a multi-billion-dollar program over the next 3 to 4 years, What we expect to get for our benefit, for our customer benefit, which is the most important thing, is the type of capacity and improvement in performance that dramatically will improve the mobile experience to meet the needs that I previously described, as well as the type of growth that we're experiencing that I also had described. On our side, if it drops our cost per megabit, we can stay on a path that helps enable customers to really use the network the way they want to. We could choose to constrain customer usage in an effort to manage the costs, or you could go to a lower cost floor in order to allow customers to use it for what they thought they bought, which was a mobile data service that they want to use where they want, how they want to do it. So this is a foundational program for us that's born out of this growth that we're seeing in the data network. One of the points I wanted to make on this slide, and there probably aren't a ton of RF engineers in the audience, but I want to point out that this idea around a 4G network being truly a mobile IP network. Not only does it give you the faster speed, but it gives you the flatness of the architecture that allows you to be in a much more low latency environment with really IP access all the way out to the edge. So in this case, what we have been planning to do is, in conjunction with Clearwire, who we own a slightly less than majority part of now, but we have built into this plan the idea of doing a joint build with them, something we call network hosting or network sharing. And in that technology, we can choose to deploy the WiMAX network today, which is a 4G network in its true sense. It's an IP-based technology. Or we could choose to go to LTE in the future, which is also essentially a mobile IP type of infrastructure, both of which are very fast, and both of which are really in the category of being a true IP network. So this platform is the one that we decided on in order to give us that flexibility and ability to grow in the future to address the type of growth that I just showed you a couple slides ago. Won't take you through all these slides, but there are a couple of other points I wanted to make. The yellow blocks really represent the type of capacity and performance improvement to deliver that mobile experience and make better use of the spectrum that we're choosing to enable. On the bottom half, you'll see a core network modernization. We're currently about partway through an IP-based core infrastructure for voice and data. You know, data is IP at a point. This project takes it the rest of the way, where we can now unbundle all the elements of the network, embed them in our IMS infrastructure, and then allow ourselves to create more flexible services using the building blocks of all the attributes of the network and put it together in applications that customers will use and enjoy. Right now, you can get part of them are in IMS and part of them aren't, and now this will finish that job to put all different sorts of capabilities and make it accessible for IP-based services and infrastructure. The only other point I'll make on this, obviously the bandwidth drives us to an Ethernet backhaul network versus a TDM-based. The push-to-talk modernization is really more of it's very much oriented on a challenge that we have in trying to consolidate our two wireless networks into a single one. In order to do that, we need to deploy a push-to-talk product that not only duplicates what we've provided in our IDEN push-to-talk product, but also adds on to it the capabilities of a mobile data infrastructure. So now what I've talked about is how we're particularly addressing the issue of the data growth by throwing hardware at it. And you know, this is sort of the arms race we're all in. We pour a lot of money into the network to fundamentally grow the capacity up to the limits of its spectrum in order to handle as much data as we can. But that in itself is not a sustainable option for us. We have to find other ways to manage that data flow and still provide the end user the experience that we need. And this is something, as a network operator, really changes a lot of elements of what you have to deal with, and you wind up needing to manage and surveil or service manage a lot of elements that are basically outside of your control. So if you look in the far right, the offload concepts, there's a lot of discussion around Wi-Fi offload. So the minute you start thinking about Wi-Fi offload, it's good for operators that own the large, expensive wireless mobile networks. And if a customer's at home and they've got a Wi-Fi network in their house, to get some of that traffic onto their home network carried by a Comcast, a Time Warner, I guess, well, a Quest in the case of Denver, or now CenturyLink, I guess. Those are things that are good for us as a wireless operator. It's good for the customer because they'll have access and they're already paying for that linkage. But it's also a network that, as a wireless operator, we're not managing that. So how do you manage that service experience? And that's a challenge for us to think through. And that's extending that concept beyond just Wi-Fi to any other network that happens to be available that's not your own. So that's the heterogeneous network kind of concept. There are some emerging technologies that are suggesting you could actually combine the capabilities of various networks that you have wireless access to and combining that into a single high-speed pipe. A little early in that, but those are types of things that, from an offload perspective, wireless operators have to consider and pursue in order to help manage this data growth that we're experiencing. On the top, you see the topic of optimization. The concept from our perspective is how do you optimize the amount of bandwidth you need that takes into consideration what the customer is doing with the application and what kind of device do they have in their hand. So if you have a small device like this one, which has got a 3.5-inch screen or thereabouts, versus a 10-inch tablet, and you're doing a video application, you don't need quite as much bandwidth for the same user experience between this device and a tablet device. So that's the idea of how do you know what intelligence does the network have about what type of device you have, where are you in the network, are you in a place where there's a lot of available bandwidth or only a limited amount of bandwidth, and how do you create an experience that's consistent for the subscriber. A lot different than the concept of just throttling, where you just say, I'm not giving you all that bandwidth, so I don't care how good the experience is. It's a much more sophisticated approach to managing that experience and saving some network resources, but still delivering to the customer what they want. And the last area is in the area of policy, which can take a lot of different forms. From a marketing perspective, you could choose to do, there's talk and discussion around tiered pricing. You get a premium services. So in that regard, you can establish some policy for your users based on the level of service they're choosing to pay for. The other part that is something we currently do and all operators currently do is monitoring and addressing what we would call abusers. And these are folks that are on the outer limit and an outlier in their usage, and it is not consistent with the fundamental intent of the type of service you're providing. What we found, depending on the type of device, somewhere between 2 to 3% of the users drive 25 to 35% of the total tonnage on the network for that device category. So it's you get a nice distribution, and then you got these outliers way off, way off to the right. I've seen numbers where we've got customers using in excess of 700 gigabytes per month on their device. That is not what a mobile data network is intended to do, and it does harm to the other customers that are trying to use that capacity for the targeted services, the true mobile services, the true personal use that we're trying to encourage customers to use. So we do have to monitor those types of outliers and address them, which may mean taking them off the network if they don't curtail their usage. But this is, again, a very, very small percentage, but that very, very small percentage drives a tremendous amount of data, and they are probably doing things like streaming peer-to-peer type networks. They're perhaps got it connected to a website that could be doing anything. With those types of usage, you can speculate what the more popular uses of the internet are for high bandwidth. But those are the other types of policy issues that operators have to deal with, and have to deal with it carefully, because we do want to adhere to the spirit of the service that we sold to customers, but we also want to address those that are really not using the service for its intended purpose. So I'm going to close up on the topic that probably keeps many of us awake at night, and that's security, and the risks that are now moving from the wired world into the wireless world. This is becoming an increasing issue for the industry. It's being worked on in a number of different forums, some of which sponsored by the FCC and other governmental agencies, most of which are being sponsored by various industry consortiums and organizations. But basically, just think of all the, the way I was thinking about this is if you go back, I don't know, I guess maybe 7 years or so, to the earlier days of high internet usage and the types of security issues that were emerging, the types of things that security software companies and network operators had to do to prevent DOS attacks and those sorts of things, that's all moved now into the mobile world. And it's moved there for two reasons. One is there's a lot of users, and the most important one is that these devices have got enough power in them to really be abused. So you see now the start of attacks and bots that are showing up on mobile devices. There's basically the two big bases, the iOS base that is the iPhone product and the Android base, which is actually larger than the iPhone base of users, and those are becoming the new targets. So what you're seeing now is a migration of all the techniques and capabilities that were developed to manage security and to protect customers and businesses from the bad guys on the wired internet, and that needs to now find its way over into the mobile environment and be done in a way that adapts itself to the type of unique characteristics that a mobile device or mobile service had. So on the bottom chart you can see that a lot of these are the more popular or more well publicized, I should say, but the bottom one is the one that gets your attention. Is that there's the first case where, not the first case, but that's a case where we now see an infected application on mobile devices that are sitting there lurking, doing damage or waiting to do damage or waiting to take command and launch something out to the internet that the user is not aware of. So where does this need to take us is really to take all the things we've learned from the wired internet business, all the things we learned about what hackers do, what the virus producers do, what the malicious agencies, whether they're government sponsored or individual interests and parties or industrial espionage, all the things we learned from the wired days now needs to find its way into the wireless world. Antivirus software that actually resides on your mobile device, and other than the person that doesn't have the smartphone, how many of you do have an antivirus software program on your device as we speak? Okay, not too many. Yeah. So there are free products out there, like I won't throw it out there. It's the only one I know of off the top of my head, but it's a product called Lookout that is an antivirus software for the Android operating system that will scan your applications looking for bots and all those other things that were produced and used frequently from the PC world and bringing them into the mobile space. I'd encourage you to go out and do that personally, because those 266,000 users didn't know they had a virus sitting on their device that they picked up while they were browsing a marketplace and downloaded a seemingly innocuous application, but in it was a bot that was ready to be launched. And those are the types of things that we all need to be much more aware of. And the other things you are living within the limitations of how customers want to use their mobile devices. They want them to be easy and quick to use, so a lot of hindrance for security is going to be a bit counterintuitive to the general population. But if we don't find ways to do that, that's just going to leave a lot of exposure for the companies and for the end users to be exposed to these kinds of risks. So with that, I'm going to conclude and get us off to hopefully a raucous start. Everyone's still awake out there. But hopefully you found some use out of that. But the bottom line is that with the growth of mobile data, it truly has become a mobile IP world. And that's something that I think even 3 years ago, the industry had a full appreciation for how rapidly it was going to hit us, and then all of the challenge that it was going to bring with us, both from the standpoint of managing the limited spectrum resources we have available to us, as well as the types of risks and security threats that come with it. So with that, Sonia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks. Bob, can you hear me? Yeah. So I'd like to ask the first question and throw it out. And the question is, how do you see the AT&T and T-Mobile merger affecting some of the trends over the next 5 years?
That is probably an interesting public policy debate. I think everyone probably knows by now that Sprint is adamantly opposed to the AT&T T-Mobile merger. We're doing it on the basis of we don't think it's good public policy to consolidate so much of an industry in two players, because we believe that along with that comes less innovation, less creativity. Competition fosters innovation, so I'd extend that in the context of the use of the mobile internet. We may be migrating our way back if that merger goes through, which of course we hope it does not, might be migrating back into a world where you could have any color phone as long as it was black. So think about that as you think about, for those of you interested and politically active, I would encourage you to, support our cause, because we do think it's right for the country and right for consumers. But I do worry a lot that the concentration of the wireless industry and basically into a duopoly structure will effectively slow down innovation and might very effectively manage the internet growth, but for all the wrong reasons.
Okay, I just got a question over IM, so before we open it up, and the question is, they wanted to ask you about the IPv6 support on Sprint's wireless network.
I was afraid of getting that question because it's not one I'm terribly well versed in.
And it comes from a former Sprint employee, by the way, who just left Sprint.
There's probably a lot of former Sprint employees out there in the audience. We've done a good job seeding great talent to the industry. We do support it. I think we just participated in the IPv6 Day, which I think was, a week ago? I think that's right. We've been, early into the IPv6, and it is obviously someplace where we need to go. We need to get there in the right way, and we are ardent supporters of it. And and actually, if you think about it, with all the devices coming on the network, that's yet another driver for why the IPv6 is very, very needed in the industry.
Okay, let's open it up for questions.
Jeff Houston, APNIC. In the airline industry, I assume that around 2% of the passengers consume about 25% of the passenger miles, and they're called frequent flyers. Mm-hmm. And they're cosseted. They're treated with favour. They're favourite passengers. Why does your industry call them abusers? What's wrong with your business and your business structure that your most prevalent users are the ones that you appear to hate the most?
Well, if I take the example of the 700 gigabit user, that would be like the frequent flyer taking all the seats in the airplane and you waiting at the gate to get on. That's the analogy. Spectrum is limited. And even if we had more, you ultimately run into the physics of spectrum and how much traffic capacity you can put on there. I don't like calling them abusers, but this is a category, if I showed you the chart, where you have a nice even distribution that goes out 2, 3, 4, 5 gigabits. We're not talking about that type of users. We're talking about users that are using 760 gigabits a month. That is not the intent of that customer needs to be on a wired network, and the ability, as the next speaker will talk about, the ability to grow fiber networks to address that kind of bandwidth where those kinds of applications belong is right. But I don't think it's right for a user to take all the seats on the airplane and leave everybody else at the front gate, to use your analogy. And that's what we're addressing. It's not a matter that we want to encourage the use, but we want to encourage it for the customers, the broad base of customers. They're looking to use this on a normal daily basis for email, for Facebooking. I don't know if you can drive 700 gigabits of usage off of Facebook. I don't think so on personal use. There's something else that customer is using that for. And we also have other types of basic fraud uses that fall in that category, and that's a different category as well. So no, we embrace, our philosophy, at least I'll just speak for Sprint, is twofold. One, we have encouraged usage through our unlimited plans. And if you look at our plans, I think that speaks very tangibly to our philosophy of we want customers to not have to think too much about how they're using it. And the second thing is that we're very strong and ardent supporters of an open enablement environment, meaning bring your applications, bring your ideas to our network. We will not encumber that from happening. It comes with the risk of hoping that the applications are used wisely. There was an application, as an example, and this is the type of thing that you have to work through, where it was a device that sat in a specific place, didn't move, and pinged the network every 30 seconds. Why? It's not going anywhere. It's a big thing. It doesn't, it doesn't fundamentally move. Could you ping every minute or every 5 minutes to get it done? That makes a huge difference on the consumption of the network resources on the wireless side. So that's something we do collaboratively with the application developers. And what we're finding is they understand now and are getting better and better at understanding the implications of using the network so that they can use it well. So we're not after the general customer. We're not after, I doubt that we're after, I guess maybe technically maybe 2% of you we may be after, I don't know. But no, we're not after what you consider good heavy use. Good heavy use is not what we're after. We're after ones that clearly it's something other than personal use that you're using it for. Okay, but great question, and I could tell with some sentiment in the audience. Gentleman in the back there.
Hi, my name's
Yes.
Chris. I have a question actually. So, are you sure that the 750 gig is a mobile phone user, or it's not somebody who just can't get fixed wireless or fixed line access someplace? There are lots of places in this world where you can't get fixed line access. In the United States where you serve, right? There are lots of places where you can't get access. And if my company requires me to do work on the network, it may not be the internetwork, right? It might be their corporate network, but I might get there across a VPN, and I might spend all day doing big things for my company, right? You're not differentiating that usage, right? So, first off, right? And second off, you're providing a network service. You're providing me an IP address and access to the internet. I don't think you really should care what I do with that. If I surf the porn all day, go for goat porn, right? I mean, it's perfectly legal in West Virginia to surf goat porn, right?
And, we do not police where you're going. We're not, right. And I can guarantee you, and I know for certainty, that these heavy users are in areas where there's plenty of options. This is not I'm in Colorado, so I'm not in the hills of Colorado where there is no other option other than a wireless provider. This is in core urban areas where we see this. This is where these users are. And the point is you're dealing with a limited public resource called spectrum. And we're trying to make it available to as many customers for a reasonable amount of use. And I do believe that the outliers are using it for something other than the original intent and the end user agreement.
Talk about abuse advantage.
So I guess so what I hear to some extent is we can't build POPs fast enough to get spectrum out small enough to the areas, to service a bunch of small areas versus a very large area. And I don't really want to get into the debate about building networks because we're all in that business right now. But I guess the message that comes from not just you, right? You just happen to be the guy on the stage today. From most of the wireless carriers, at least in the U.S., is, oh me, it's very hard. We have limited spectrum. And these people, they do these things that are, and you actually said sort of like they do these things that are illegal, right? I mean, you sort of are casting the customer in a criminal light. And, there are lots of use cases where I can make lots of bandwidth appear on the network for legitimate things, right? And I may have to do that for my job or for my livelihood. And I bought a service, right? Just like I bought a Fios link to my house, I could have just as easily bought Sprint. My company may require that I use the Sprint wireless card to do my job. Companies are weird, right? Not everyone says, just go pick whatever IP access you want. Have a good time. So
do you suggest that it's okay for us to lose money to provide the service? Just curious. Is it okay for us to lose money to provide the service?
Randy Bush, IAJ. If you cannot provide the customer what they want to buy of your service, then your business model is broken.
I would agree. And so for that customer, I would be happy to offer them a plan on a per megabyte basis that they would not be able to afford. I mean,
How do you know that, though?
well, we don't know that, but I'm guessing it's going to be a pretty high bill. Look at the history of the wireless industry. We have had popular pushback whenever we charge on a usage basis, and it is not customer friendly for the masses, for the average user, for the majority of users. What they do want is simplicity in their bill. They do not want usage-based billing. They don't. Tiered is a different story. That has been talked about wildly, but it's just, it's usage-based to a point.
Hi, my name is Dennis with Link Technologies. I'm on the board of directors with WISPA, which I've told most people here already. We are a lot of wireless ISPs, and I know a lot of you guys have the same question, but we run into this every day. Some of our customers who are in literally middle of nowheresville, they have an access point on a tower that has the total capacity of 3 megabit. Now, if we had 50 customers, we can give them excellent service for, say, Facebook, items like web surfing, email, things like that. But as soon as you get one user on there, or two users that are streaming Netflix, I'm going to pick on Netflix, I apologize, or are downloading 700 gig a month, it doesn't matter if the traffic is legitimate or not. They are taking up more resources than the network has, the capacity has. In our case, we don't have any more capacity to give them. We have 3 channels in 900 megahertz that we can use, unlicensed anyway, and that's it. In each one of those channels, you can put 3 radios on an AP, and it's 3 meg each. That's it. There is no more spectrum available to get faster access. And it's the same exact thing on Sprint's buying spectrum for millions and millions and millions of dollars, I'm sure. We're using unlicensed band with unlicensed spectrum that the FCC has allocated to us, and we've been trying to get more and more, just like Sprint's trying to get more and more, but it's the same difference. Eventually you have to have that wonderful network management practice that the FCC has talked about. Is it fair for us to provide 40 customers with decent access to email, web, the majority of people access to that, or is it fair to have everybody else off those APs completely slow down to dial-up speed so that one person can download their 700 meg of work data? Even if it is valid, it's still not good network management for us to do that. They can. In our case, most of our providers offer a structure in which they can buy per gig if they wish to. But a lot of ISPs, wireless ISPs, don't offer that as well because, again, we don't have any more capacity. So we would need to make 40 times what you would normally pay for you to dedicate an access point to you. And whenever I send you that bill, you're not going to like it. And that's what ends up happening. Exactly. And that's what a lot of companies do, or the companies say either you curb your bandwidth usage or we'll drop you off the network, like I guess Sprint's currently doing, and a lot of our customers do. It's a business decision. It's not necessarily stating that it's wrong or right, but those are the only 2 methods. It's either you charge them so far out of place. You've seen these bills where AT&T sent a bill for $12,000 to an individual cell phone customer. Do you think they're going to pay that? They're not. They're not going to pay it. They're going to just say, screw you, and go on to Sprint probably. Okay? But that's what's going to happen, and unless you inform them, keep them up to date, it's not going to happen.
Can you come up to the mic, please?
He's just, here you go.
I'm sorry, I've been fired up about this for a long time, so I'm sorry. I'm just saying one of several things will happen. Either the users will change their behavior, which is a benefit to you guys, to reduce their usage for the same or only slightly more. They will either do that, or they will start paying more, or they will completely leave your network. Yes, that may be a problem, but eventually they're going to find out that they either have the same problem on other networks, and they just have to deal with it, or another network will come in and start competing and figure out a way to do it cheaper. and the whole environment becomes more healthy at that point. But to just say everybody needs to use Facebook and email, and the 2% that decide they want to do something more with the network are causing the problem, that doesn't allow for growth. That doesn't spur innovation. That doesn't allow the internet to grow. The wireless operators are stifling growth at that point. And yes, there's an economic issue here, but we need to allow the entire internet community to figure out a way to come in and make this successful. And I think that the users need to be able to modify their behavior or come up with the cash to support it, one of the two. And we need to give them that information. And if the information is your bill is $12,000 a month, that will likely change their behavior. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
Hi, Rob Seastrom. I work for Time Warner Cable, but I'm speaking strictly on my own behalf here. I am a Sprint EVDO customer and have been for a number of years. I'd first off like to thank you guys for stopping intercepting my port 53 traffic and redirecting it to your own name servers. That was really a nice thing for you to stop doing, and I appreciate not messing with the traffic I'm sending through your network. I'm on an unlimited plan, but I'm not on an unlimited plan because I want simplicity on my bill. I am on an unlimited plan because your overage charges are usurious and ridiculous in the context of what it costs you to deliver the service. And for a very common one that I think everybody in this room can identify with, although I don't use SMS with my EVDO stick, SMS charges on every carrier are 5 orders of magnitude more than it costs you to provide the service. And I have no problem offering you a reasonable markup of between 1 and 2 orders of magnitude on the cost of wholesale bandwidth. But I would welcome the ability to cut my monthly bill from my unlimited service down to something where I was paying some reasonable amount for having the device on the network and then paid for every bit that I sent over the network. Because right now, what I am doing, because I am on an unlimited plan, because I don't want to be whacked with a $1 a megabyte or whatever it is, crazy overage charge if I use 275 megs instead of 250. I am subsidizing those people who are abusing your network, and I don't appreciate that. So I think that the problem, frankly, is a lack of richness of billing and plans, where I can choose the one that's correct for me. And I don't use my service when there's something better to use, like cable modem or whatever. I'm all too happy to move my traffic off of your wireless network where it's scarce. But it seems to me that actually the unlimited plans don't work the way that you perhaps think they do. Thank you.
Michael Sinatra, ESNet, also speaking for myself. I just want to go back to the airplane analogy, because I don't think it's actually the case that you've got a frequent flyer who's taking up all the space. I think you have an airline that is allowing its flyers to bring an unlimited amount of luggage on the plane, and then when somebody brings too much and the plane can't get off the ground, or it takes 7 hours to get from Los Angeles to San Francisco, you say, oh, somebody abused the luggage policy. The luggage policy allows people to bring as much luggage as they can on the plane. So you need to, like as Rob said, you need to make something that's a little bit richer and that's going to capture the usage patterns that people have and give them incentives to do the right thing.
Kevin Oberman, ESNet, also speaking for myself. In many ways, I think that the broadband providers are their own worst enemies, and that their marketing departments and their engineering departments don't communicate a whole lot. In terms of practicalities. Sprint in particular, your president appears on TV rather regularly explaining that Sprint's unlimited is really unlimited. He doesn't say, except of course for those who download a whole bunch of stuff who are therefore abusing the system. He says it's unlimited. Everybody else, of course, says it's unlimited, and it really isn't unlimited, so at least he's a bit more honest than the others. All the other unlimited plans have limits in them, which strike me as kind of odd. But the reality is, as long as you're offering an unlimited service for a flat rate, I see nothing abusive about people taking advantage of that. Yes, it may be that things would work better if they were wired, but gee, it's convenient. Just pull out my cell phone and and watch the movie. Well, no, actually, I'd never watch a movie on a cell phone, but I know people who would and do. And they eat up a lot of bandwidth because you ask for it. Your marketing department says, please use our unlimited bandwidth. And then you say, oh, crud, we're out of bandwidth because of these abusive people. There's got to be some correction there. Either you've got to charge per volume of traffic uploaded, and heaven knows I know that will not be inexpensive. I know how much telcos have paid for years to do accounting and keep track of all of the phone calls people make for billing, and I know it is tremendously expensive. And that's one of the reasons Sprint started going to flat rate for mobile use quite some time ago. I believe they were one of the leaders in that. But something's got to change, or the system simply is going to breed discontent and lots of unhappy people. And many of those unhappy people are doing nothing that is really improper. It's just that those who are footing the tab for it think it's improper because it's hurting their business model. And I don't have a solution. I just think it's a really big problem that has to be addressed in a rational manner that takes the realities of the market into account. Unlimited data plans, frankly, just simply don't make sense.
Rob Seastrom again.
Are you speaking for yourself?
I am speaking for myself, and regretfully I need to take back something I thanked you for earlier. In my haste to get up to the microphone, I made a factual error. You guys are, in fact, intercepting my UDP 53 traffic and blocking my TCP 53 traffic altogether. So instead of thanking you for not doing that, I would like to ask you to please stop doing that. Thank you.
Well, can you, I have no idea what that is. So I will, Sonia would like to get some, I don't understand what that means. I'm a senior vice president network. I got people like Sonia here that are smarter than I am. I'm happy to take that complaint back and understand why or what it is, what we're doing, why we're doing it. I don't know. So, but I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting. I understand I'm getting a little bit crucified up here. But I would like to point out a couple of things. We have probably the best data plans, the best voice plans in the industry today. Go out and compare, please, and do it factually. And I'm sorry, apparently the unlimited plans don't fit your needs. We try to find plans that fit everyone's needs. We were also the first ones to introduce, well ahead of our competitors, what I think is closer to in a true 4G network in the WiMAX deployment we did with Clearwire, where we spent billions of dollars to build out that network, which, you know, we would like to continue to expand it. And we're about to invest many more billions of dollars over and above our normal investment rate in order to provide a network that can accommodate more tonnage and more users as unfettered as we can. Everyone seems to have picked up on this abuser topic, which I don't particularly care for either, but I have to make a choice of, do I want to better serve the 98, 99% of my other customers and let them use those 4, 5, 6 gigabits per month unfettered and open up some of that capacity in an individual cell site area, or do I let all the baggage take all the cargo hold of the plane? It's a choice we're choosing to make to at least address it, to try to serve the 98% of the need. So is there a different question or topic that we could get on?
Sort of. Sam Weiler, Sparta. I want to run with your airline analogy for a minute. I really like it.
It's not my airline analogy. Where'd he go?
Fine. Who do we give credit for this one to? That industry has a long history of dealing with overcommitting when it sells. And the answer to that has been found. It's called regulation. There's a penalty that every airline pays when they have to bump a passenger, particularly involuntarily. Those rules have been around for a long time. They've just been revised. Wouldn't you just love to see those for y'all?
Not particularly.
So maybe look at the plans again.
I do like the idea of charging by the drink for a set of customers. We are in fact, for this 2 to 3%, we are going to give them the choices that you described, those exact choices that you described. Modify your behavior, or pay for it or find another provider to do it. That is exactly what we're going to do. And it's, you know, we're going to lose the customer, and that may be the outcome of it, and that's fine. It's better in the long run for the 98% of the customers that would like access to that wireless network, because remember, what's in the air is shared. It's not dedicated to a given user. It needs to be available for as many users as possible. And if I'm being criticized for offering unlimited plans that are unlimited within some realistic boundary way off to the outlying area, then so be it, because it's still a better plan than you're going to find elsewhere in the industry. And, you know, again, from an innovation perspective, 2 years ago we launched the WiMAX network. What I think is and we can have that as a separate debate of what's a true 4G network and what's not. But it is a lower latency, low latency mobile IP network that we deployed, taking the risk ahead of the industry and probably motivating other companies to follow us. Yes, sir.
Okay. We're out of time now, so we're going to have to cut off the questions. Thank you, Bob, very much for coming, and thank you for taking the abuse.
That's okay.
For Sprint.